So when we look at integers, we're looking at positive and negative whole numbers and the number 0. All the positive numbers, all the negative numbers, and 0. So the first thing we can do right off the bat is comparing numbers and putting numbers in order. So, like I said, you don't have to copy this word for word, because whatever you miss, I'm going to post it to Google Classroom along with the video. So, whatever you miss, you'll always be able to get that. So, first thing to keep in mind, a negative number is always less than a positive number. That's always. So if you have -9 and 2, -9 is always less than 2. Remember, the open mouth goes to the bigger number. Positive numbers get larger the farther away you get from 0. So you have 14 and 30. Obviously, 14 is less than 30. Negative numbers get smaller as you get farther away from 0. The thing with negative numbers, the closer you are to 0, the bigger the number is. So you got -4 and -11. -4 would be bigger because it's closer to 0. So -4 greater than 0. So that's comparing integers. When you talk about putting numbers in order, when you put numbers in order, you always start with your negative numbers, then 0, and then your positive numbers. So the numbers we have are 0.3, 7 over 5, which if you make that a decimal, that's 1.4. -1, -1.5, 0, and 1/4. And 1/4 is 0.25. So when we put the numbers in order, we start with the negatives, we start with the smallest possible number, and then we work our way closer to the 0. So you got -1, -1.5. So -1.5 would be the smallest. So that gets written first, followed by -1. That takes care of your negatives. Now, if we have a 0, and we put the 0, which we do, then you put your positive numbers. Positive numbers, you go from least to greatest. So 1/4 would go first, then 0.3, and then 7 over 5. So there's your order from least to greatest. Yours doesn't have to be that spaced out. I literally just spaced it out to keep everything separate. But yours doesn't have to be that spaced out. Any questions before we continue? Any questions before we continue? All right. Seeing none, hearing none, let's keep going. So, with integers, that gives us 2 new operations, opposite and absolute value. Opposite simply changes signs. So, what's the opposite of a positive number? A negative number? That's negative. So the opposite of positive 3 would be negative 3. And the opposite of positive 5 is 4. Negative 5. And then the opposite is true. The opposite of a negative number is a positive number. So the opposite of negative 3.7 would be positive 3.7. Now, you don't have to put the plus sign. If you just wrote it as 3.7, that still means positive. The opposite of negative 8 would be positive 8. Again, you don't have to put the plus sign in the middle. It's not attached to anything else. And then absolute value. Absolute value is a number's distance from 0. So in symbols, you have the 2 lines with the number inside of it. So that's what absolute value means. The key thing here, absolute value is always positive. So, for example 1, if you take the absolute value of 9, that's just regular old 9. Example 2, absolute value of negative 10.4 is positive 10.4. The number doesn't change, the sign does. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. Because 12 units away. And the absolute value of negative 11 over 4 is positive 11. So anytime you have absolute value, the answer turns to positive. If it's positive, it'll stay positive. If it's negative, it's going to turn to positive. Any questions on this first page before we move on to adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing? There you go. You can throw a thumbs up or a head nod, or you can put the question in the chat, or you can come off of mute. Any questions before we go forward? All right, then let's move forward. So, when we deal with adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, it all really depends on what kind of signs you're working with. So for adding, it depends on whether the signs are the same or if they're different. So if the signs are the same, meaning 2 positives or 2 negatives, add the numbers, keep the sign. Add the numbers and keep the sign. So for example 1, 2 positives, you add them up would stay positive. 2 negatives would stay negative. 17 plus 8 is 25. And since both numbers were negative, it would stay negative. Now, you might be thinking, well, Mr. Lowe, I was taught that a negative and a negative was positive. That's true when you're multiplying or dividing. Not when you're adding, not when you're subtracting. So that's something you got to keep in mind. 2 negatives is a positive when you're multiplying or dividing. That's if the signs are different. These two, the signs are the same, positive and positive, negative and negative. But when the signs are different, positive and negative, or negative and positive, now we subtract. So now we subtract. So I like that she asked that question. Always pay attention to those signs, because that's going to dictate what you do next. So if we're adding, we know that we're adding because of the sign in the middle, and the signs are different. 17 is positive, 3 is negative. First thing we're going to do is subtract. So we're going to do 17 minus 3, which is 14. But now we keep the sign from the bigger number. So you have a 17 and you have a 3. 17 is bigger. So that means this answer is positive 14. So positive because 17 is bigger than 3. And let's do one more example of that. Negative 14 plus 9. So we're adding a negative number with a positive number. So the signs are different. So we subtract the numbers. You have a 14 and you have a 9. 14 is the bigger number, and it was negative. So you attach the negative sign. So this answer is negative because 14 was bigger than 5. Bigger than 9, sorry. Alright, so any questions on adding? Main thing you got to keep in mind is if the signs are the same, there's one set of rules. If the signs are different, there's a different set of rules. You just got to pay attention to what you're doing. Let's go to subtraction. Anybody in here remember keep, change from 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade? Your teacher used keep, change. They may have called it something different, but it pretty much falls in the same category. So when you subtract, you keep the first number, change subtraction to addition, and change the second number to its opposite. So for problem 5, this would become 7 plus negative 12. Keep the first number, change subtraction to addition, and take the opposite of the second number. So now that we've rewritten it, we got to solve it. So 7 is positive, 12 is negative. Different signs. You subtract. Since 12 is bigger than 7, this answer is negative. That answer is negative. Any questions with problem 5? It's pretty much the same process we're going to use with 6, 7, and 8. Go ahead. You don't have to, just make sure that you're showing all that work on all the work that you have to do. Yeah, on your assignments, yes, you got to show all the work. All right, problem 6. So 2 minus -5, keep the first number, change subtraction to addition, take the opposite of the second number, which is 5. And 2 plus 5 will give you 7. Both of those are positive numbers, so that's pretty easy. Example 7, keep the first number, change subtraction to addition, take the opposite of the second number, which would be positive 1. So you have a negative plus a positive. Subtract. Since 9 was bigger, your answer would be -8. And then last one, before we do multiplying and dividing, -22 minus 6, keep the first number, change subtraction to addition, and then the 6 becomes -6. This time you'll see that both numbers are negative, so that will give you -28. Any questions with subtraction? Last one is going to be multiplying and dividing. That's pretty easy. All right, then let's multiply and divide. And then the last part we'll finish up on Wednesday. So, multiplying and dividing is very, very simple because you're doing multiplying and dividing the way that you normally would. The only thing that changes is you have to worry about the signs. If the signs are the same, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, the answer is negative. So that's all that pretty much means. Multiply or divide the way you normally would. Same sign, the answer is positive. Different signs, the answer is negative. So with example 9, you have a positive times a negative. So the answer is going to be negative. All you have to worry about doing is 9 times 9, which is 81. That's it. Problem's over. For 10, you have a negative times a positive, which is negative, because the signs are different. 1/2 times 24. So remember, if one of them is a fraction, make both of them a fraction. 24 over 2 is 12. That's -12. Or just remember that half of something means divided by 2. Let's finish the last 2 examples. Negative divided by a negative is positive. So then 48 divided by 6 is 8. Again, remember, the 8's not attached to anything, so you don't need to put the plus sign. And then 150 divided by 25, positive divided by positive is positive. 150 divided by 25, then how many quarters does it take to give me $1.50? That's 6 quarters. And that's plus 6. Any questions multiplying or dividing before I show you what your homework is? And I'll take you directly into your learning time. That's